Good morning and happy Tuesday. My name is Lee and I'm the CEO of Nurture Growth Biofertilizer. We're very excited to co-host this webinar in partnership with the Ontario Craft Wineries and as well as Malivoire. Today, Dr. Ankita is going to be talking about enhancing grapevine health using biofertility solutions. And the very exciting part of this webinar, which is why, I think the most of you here, is the exciting trial that we did with Malivoire last year. So for today, I have a quick introduction, which I've already done, and then Helena, the program lead at Ontario Craft Winery, will say a few words. Dr. Ankita will do her presentation for 15 minutes, and then Dr. Steve Kornic from Malivoire will present his trial data, and then at the end of that, we will have a question and answer period. We ask that you put the questions in the chat group, and then at the end, I will go through each one of them and invite you to ask our panelists the questions, or I can read your questions. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Helena to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. Some of you might know me, some of you might not. So my name is Helena McKinney, and I am the program lead and coordinator for Ontario Craft Wineries. So I support our membership with kind of communications. We have really been hosting more educational workshops and seminars for the membership. We've also invited some grape growers here today because we feel like the information that Lee has to share with us is super valuable. Nurture Growth has been a trade member and a part of our association for a number of years. Lee and I have been excited about hosting something like this for a while, really pumped to be collaborating with Malivoire as well. And that's a little bit about me. I also run the Ontario Craft Wine Conference. So if you have any questions about OCW or events coming up, I'm the person to ask. So thank you for collaborating with me today, Lee, and Malivoire as well.
And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Ankita Garkoti. She has been a valuable member of our team since August of 2024. So she has been helping us run various experiments as well as our agronomist arm. So if you have any specific scientific questions outside of this seminar or any technical questions, we do have someone on staff now that will be able to answer any questions that you have, and she can be reached at ankita@nurturewithbio.com. So I will turn this over to Ankita.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning to all of you. I'm Dr. Ankita Garkoti and working as Senior Science Officer at Nurture Growth Biofertilizers. I am PhD in plant pathology, and I worked as a scientific officer in organic department in Ministry of Agriculture, India. I worked in biofertilizers, organic fertilizers, and biocontrol agents, and I conducted many training programs for farmers, agriculture extension, agriculture officials, and even related to agriculture. So today I am here to talk about enhancing grapevine health using biofertilizer solutions. So today's presentation is all about introduction to grapevine health and what is the importance of soil health in grapevine and how biofertility solutions work, benefits of biofertility solutions in grapevine health, and practical tips and limitation with conclusion. So here we are starting with the grapevine health. So for the growth, for growing grapes, the healthy vines are the foundation of high quality grapes. And to grow good quality grapes and getting the grapes qualitative and quantitative, sustainable farming practices are one of the best solution I can say, which is helpful in the production of good quality grapes. And by using these sustainable agriculture farming practices, which are helpful in increasing the production as well as reducing the environmental impact. And going ahead with these sustainable farming practices, use of biofertility solutions are very important, as grapevine is one of the crop which required highly enriched soil, and it needs different type of essential nutrients, as different macronutrients and micronutrients are very important for the growth of grapevine. This is the list of macro and micronutrients which are required for the growth and development of grapes. healthy grapes. So whenever we are growing anything, we have to first talk about soil health, because whatever we are growing it in the soil. So soil should be healthy, and by using these biofertility products or biofertilizers, we are able to enhance the nutrient availability of soil by fixing of nitrogen, by making the phosphorus and potash available for plant, and fixing these essential micro and macronutrients and make it available for the growth and development of plant. By using these biologicals, what we do is, how they work is, they enhance the microbial content of soil so that the plant can intake those beneficial microbes, and they will directly helpful in the growth and development of plant. And by use of these biologicals, it is helpful in improving the soil structure and water retention of the soil. So I'm going to explain these points with the help of diagrammatic representation so that it will be easy to understand. Since microbes which are present in grapevine, it can be a little complex situation, but let's try to understand with the help of this diagram. So this is the diagram about grapevine microorganisms and the microorganism interaction with each other in the soil. So here we can see the first number is rhizodeposition, which is plant roots exudate certain type of enzymes and liquids, which is helpful for the growth and development of microbes. So the microbes which are present in the soil can be beneficial or can be pathogenic. So any type of microbes can feed on these root exudates, but they have their different mode of action, like their relation with each other and the relation of those microbes with the host. So these microbes can be pathogenic, as we can see here, or these can be plant growth promoting bacteria or any biofertilizer or any microbes which have the capacity to fix atmospheric nitrogen, which is able to solubilize phosphorus or potash and make it available for plant. These microbes have the biofertilization process, as they can be able to fix the nitrogen, phosphorus, and make it available, which comes under biofertilization. Biostimulation is certain microbes secrete some different type of hormones which stimulate the plant system and help them to resistant against different type of stress conditions. For example, some microbes secrete a certain type of hormones or enzymes which which are helpful in water stress condition, in which what happens is, whenever there is a scarcity of water, they induce the leaves to close the stomata so that excess water will not be lost. So by this way, these type of biostimulants are helpful to survive the plant in certain type of stressful conditions. So if in the soil, if there are any beneficial microbes, there can be pathogenic microbes as well, and which can cause certain type of diseases in plant. So whenever these pathogenic agents or microbes try to attack on the plant have the ability to resist themselves from certain these type of pathogenic microbes. And because of the presence of beneficial microbes, plant is able to intake the more microbes and macrobes, and increasing the resistance of plant, and which is ultimately helpful in protecting themselves against these pathogenic plants. Similarly, the bioprotection is also works in the same way. Certain certain beneficial microbes as trichoderma have the ability to control the different type of soil-borne pathogens, for example, fusarium and other type of soil-borne diseases. So overall, there is there is a complex structure where those microbes interact with each other and interact with the plant, and the beneficial microbes interact positively with the plant and helpful in the growth and development of plants. Since more nutrients are present in the soil, it will helpful for the root expansion, and if the roots are growing good, so they will intake more and more nutrients. The more nutrients will go to the plant will be healthy, and its growth and development will be good, and that's why we will get more berries. Or this is applicable in all type of plants, but this is particularly in case of grapevine. So now the question is how biofertility solution works. As if we are talking about biofertilizers, they have the ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen and make it available for plant to use. And by using this technique, there is a reduction in synthetic fertilizers, so we don't have to rely totally upon synthetic fertilizers by using these biologicals, and these have the ability to solubilize the phosphorus and potassium, and which is helpful in providing the plant those essential nutrients and improving the root health. Similarly, as we already discussed in the earlier slide, that they stimulate the growth hormone, which is helpful in the growth and development of plant. And bioprotection and protecting root against pathogen is also caused because of this biocontrol ability of this microorganism. So benefits of biofertility in grapevines, this is also, as we talked, as enhanced nutrient efficiency is there. And if the plant is able to intake more and more nutrients, it will be healthy, it will be able to manage any type of stress, and helpful in giving us good quality and quantity as well. So by using these biofertilizer, this is a sustainable way to grow our crop, and we don't have to rely completely upon the chemicals. And stress resistance is also, as we discussed in the earlier slide, and economic benefits also there, because we are using these biologicals, so we don't have to completely rely on different type of fertilizers. So this is a study in which this is a study done by Vijayalakshmi and her team, and they have checked the use of biofertilizers in grapevine, and what they have found is by using biologicals with recommended dose of biofertilizer, when they increase the use of azotobacter, phosphorus solubilizing, and potash releasing bacteria, they have found that the number of vines and bunch size is they have found it is in higher number. And similar results they have found in bricks level as well, that the bricks level is higher when they use biofertilizers. Similar results we have found when we have done the trial with one of the grape grower, Pat Johnston, where they find a similar results of increasing yield and bricks level in 2 different type of varieties of grapes. And similar results we are going to get the results from Malivoire, which is the main exciting and informative presentation in today's webinar. So they are going to share their results, which are somewhat similar. So we will get the detail in the next presentation. Now I will quickly talk about the practical tips for using biofertility solutions. So for using these biofertility solutions, the first thing we can do is we have to do is soil testing, so that we will know that what is the status of soil, so that accordingly we can use those biofertility products. Application timing is also important, as we have to use those biofertility products in a critical growth stage. And when we use it in the integration of different integrated pest management techniques, it is more beneficial. And of course, the regular monitoring of these grapevine is very important to maintain grapevine health. So with the positive things, there is always some limitations. So these are the limitation of biofertilizers. So I'm not going in details. These are the general things, since we have the other presentation. So I'm not going to talk in detail about this. Now the conclusion, since biofertility solutions, they are the best practices in sustainable agriculture where we can use these biofertility solutions to increase our production, to increase our quality. And since what we are doing is we are directly using it in our plants, and we are using in the soil. So we are making our soil healthy with more and more nutrients so that plant can take those nutrients, and which is directly helpful in the growth and development of plant. And ultimately, we will get the good fruits in case of this grapevine. So using this biological is an excellent solution when we are talking about sustainable agriculture in grapevine health. So this is all about my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ankita, for sharing your presentation. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Steve Kornic, who is the Assistant Vineyard Manager at Malivoire. We met last year at the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Convention and had discussions about doing some trials. We were very fortunate that I learned that Steve also is very keen on chemistry and biology, as he can tell you a little bit more about his education experience. So last year we conducted this trial together, and he treated it like a science experiment. So the presentation of the results from Malivoire are from year one. We will continue this trial this year as well, and hopefully share some exciting data for year two, and showing that our product works better in year two and year three. And I see here a number of our growers that are here, and I'd just like to say hello. So now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Steve Kornic.
Thank you very much, Lee, for the introduction. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Oshawa, Ontario, which, if any of you guys were old enough and drove GM cars at that time, my father probably helped build them. Being in a GM town, it was more assumed I would end up there, but I decided to go the university route. Now, where I literally was in the one agricultural spot growing up that was surrounded by the city, and I was lucky enough through high school that I was able to work on a sheep and dairy farm, which turned into a 10-year stint as I continued through my bachelor's degree. My original intention in going to university was to become a veterinarian, but as I got into chemistry deeper and deeper through electives, I actually switched full over to chemistry, and I achieved a BSc that was both equally chemistry and biology, which is a bit of a unique blend. And from there, I went on and did a master's in metal oxide catalysis, and finally a PhD that was focused on electrochemistry and looking at a little thing called zeolites, which basically is something that we use in the cellar all the time in the form of bentonite, which is kind of funny that it came around that way. So my focus in really my degrees was chemistry, and a lot of it was analytical. After doing a little stint of teaching between the University of Guelph and Laurier, I landed a job for 11 years at McMaster University, where I was a research scientist helping students plan out their research, get their answers. And then I was also doing a lot of retro engineering with outside clients to figure out what materials were. But as times go, my job was declared redundant, so I went back to school and entered into the Niagara College program for the Winery and Viticulture Technician program. And as many of you are familiar with this, part of that is going off and working a harvest. And I was lucky enough to get hired on at Malivoire. And so in 2018, I did my first harvest there. And then, just with talking with Tristan, I landed into the vineyard into 2019. And then after my second harvest, I just kind of never left. They happily hired me on, at least I hope it was happily. They hired me on, and my position became assistant vineyard manager, where I actually spent about 10 to 11 months of the year out in the vineyard. And then I'm lucky enough to go in and help make the wine during harvest. So I'm in a bit of a unique position that I get to see everything from the vine right on through to the bottle, which makes it a little bit of fun, and I get to see a lot of really, really neat stuff. Okay, so if we go to the first slide, Lee, please. Okay, so in discussing with Lee last year when we first met, my whole idea behind this was proof of concept. Is this actually going to work? So of course, I picked probably what is our toughest site. We're looking at our Genova vineyard here. Unfortunately, this picture's from 2020, so it's not updated, but it's located on the top of the Niagara Escarpment, just a little bit south of the intersection of Frost Road and Mud Street. Our current varieties in there are Gamay and Cabernet Franc. What's not in the picture is if you take a look at the rows of vines on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a space on just right beside them. We have now planted that with further Gamay and Cabernet Franc vines. So the ages of vines in this vineyard, the young vines are, as of the time of the study concluding last year, were 3 years, and the Gamay vines are roughly around 14. Now, because this is on top of the escarpment, we don't necessarily get the full effect of the warm air off the lake. It is our only site with the windmills, which kick on when temperatures get too cold. But bud break is typically about 2 weeks later than our other vineyards, which do back up against the Niagara Escarpment. And the picture on the first slide was basically my office view in the fall, which is the Niagara Escarpment right behind our vineyard. Yeah, there it is there. And that was, yeah, I was taking it around middle October. So basically, we chose this site because is there a way we can actually move this forward and make it, you know, enhance it so it's not so far behind all the others? Now, on the next slide, let's see what we've got. So the study. So the purpose was to study how the microbes can enhance the growth of the vines. I looked at this from 2 points of view. I looked at it from the vineyard point of view by looking at the growth, and then I wanted to take a look at the winemaking point of view by taking a look at the clusters. And is this doing more than just allowing the vine to grow? Is this going to do something for the grapes that can raise the quality for winemaking and make better wines? And this is where my whole idea of being in the vineyard as well as the cellar really comes into play. Next view, please, Lee. So for the growth study, we used both older and younger vines were studied, but I'm going to present most of the data on the older vines because that's where the interesting stuff is. And we did approximately 1 hectare of the vines treated. The microbe solution was applied in a 1% solution. So the first thing we did was a soil drench. And then as per the instructions laid out, we applied it as a follicular spray right up to bloom. And then after the fruit set, we continued with the sprays 2 weeks apart from there. Now, the trellis in this vineyard is very nice in that it doesn't matter what rows you are in, the heights of the wires are comparable. So we have the fruiting wire, which supports the growth of the fruit and the weight of the fruit. And then we have the first, second, and third catch wires. And throughout the vineyard, these things are all at the same height. So it makes it very easy to go through and say, okay, how many vines are above today a certain catch wire? How many vines are below the catch wire? Now, I managed to get growth data on 4 different dates. And if we want to flip to the next slide. So this next one is a really neat slide. This is the only point where I'm going to talk about the young vines so much. But so if we take a look on the left-hand side, we have the young Gamay vines. As I said before, these were 3 years old. So all the treated vines are in blue. So on the left-hand side is basically looking above the third catch wire. So this is right at the top of our trellis at this point. And we can see that there is definitely a proportionate of the young vines above that third wire compared to the untreated vines. And then if we flip over to the other side, this is the reverse now. We can see that more of the untreated vines are below that third wire, and we have fewer of the treated vines below the third wire. So this basically was showing that within the young vines, we were seeing a huge growth difference in that these vines were able to achieve the top wire at a sooner rate. Now, the old Gamay is a little bit of a different proportion if you take a look at it. By the time on this, which was July 3rd, when these measurements were done, we could see upwards of 60% of our old vines had reached or exceeded above the third wire. Whereas we were dealing with, if you look at the untreated, we were just under 40%. So basically what we're looking at here is that there was a bigger effect on these older vines, and they were able to literally achieve the third wire ahead of schedule, so to speak, compared to the untreated vines. Now, if we go to the next page here, in this picture, on the left-hand side, we have the untreated vines. Now, this was an interesting day because I was driving to the vineyard with one of our workers, and, you know, we were driving through a different end of the vineyard, and he says, "What did you guys do to these vines?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, half of them are growing like crazy." He says, "The other half aren't." And if you take a look down the row of the untreated vines, it's hard to see the wires, but you can actually see the tops of our trellis posts there. So the top of the trellis, the third wire on that point would be about 3 inches below the top of that post. So you can see that the untreated vines really did not look as good when you flip over to the treated vines on the other side. And those are all pretty much at the top wire. So right there, you can see that there was some kind of massive growth that happened. So the interesting point on this is that within about 2.5 weeks, the untreated vines have caught up pretty close to these treated vines. So what we were seeing here was an accelerated growth that gave us more canopy earlier on in the season, which, as we know, can have a profound effect on ripening and the ability to move stuff around in the between the roots and the berries and the canopy throughout the season. So now if we go to the next one. So basically the vines treated with microbes had accelerated growth when compared to untreated vines for both the older and younger vines. As I said, they caught up for 2 weeks. Basically the untreated vines did catch up after about 2 weeks. Now, as we all know, 2024 was a really pretty good growing season. For the most part, there were few issues. The vines weren't under stress as it has been in previous vintages. So this basically gives us a good baseline as to what this can do. Now, if we go on to the next slide here. So this next little bit here is a whole little package of data that the individual points on their own. It's hard to actually see a story, but when you actually start taking a look at the whole package put together, you actually start seeing trends here. So the whole idea of taking a look at this was the cluster and petiole analysis. Now, when I started the study last year, would have been about April, I was basically looking at, okay, we're going to do growth. But as we managed to get on loan an instrument for analyzing basically grape must, which we would test as we approach harvest. I decided to see, can we take a look at what's going on in the berries on these treated vines? And this is where we start seeing an interesting one. So the purpose of this part was to basically just take a look at, is there any advantage of using this stuff with respect to getting maybe a better crop and better wine? So if we go on to the next slide. So I only managed to get one collection in of clusters. That's the unfortunate part about this study. I wish I had time to have two, but as I transitioned into the cellar right around the time this was collected, it made it very difficult to get back out there. So in taking a look at this, the cluster weights were determined. So we basically just took a number of clusters, we weighed them together and took an average. Now the juice was analyzed for Brix, acidity, pH, extractables, and volatile acidity. So these are important things we take a look at for the most part. Like if we're taking a look at when to harvest, we're going to be looking at Brix, acidity, and pH. And as long as we can achieve a pretty good acidity and pH, we can actually probably look towards looking at harvest. If the Brix is a bit low, that's a little easier to fix, but generally everything comes along in a nice little package in a good season. Now, the juice analysis was performed using what's called an Anton-Par Lisa analyzer. It basically will run the sample through the system and come up with results for about 12 or 13 different parameters. And then we also took a look at petiole analysis to take a look at the micronutrients that were available at the time of raisin in the vines. So if we go on to the next page. So basically the Brix is a sugar concentration within the berries. I mean, this ultimately converts over to alcohol. The acidity, concentrations of tartaric and malic acids. Now, the balance that we look for is as a grape ripens, it always starts high in acidity, low in sugar. So as we start approaching harvest, we start seeing this switch around where the sugar builds up and the acidity drops. And I know there's a few winemakers in here, and as we look at things, we try to get that balance between sugar and acidity, which can be tough in some years. I mean, if it's a cool year, sometimes it's very tough to bring the acid down to within a good range that we can actually properly compensate. So now the pH is the pH of the juice, and that's really to basically describe that picture, everything in there that's contributing to acidity coming up on that one. It's a very complex relationship. It's not linear by any means. So pH is, if we hit target in the vineyard with pHs, that's when we really have to start thinking about harvest, if we haven't already been doing that. Now, the extractables that this system analyzes for, these are components of the juice such as tannins, pigments, and phenols, everything that isn't dealing with acidity or sugar. So this is where we started looking at, you know, how deep are the grapes? What kind of pigment are we going to get out of them? How deep do we think our reds are going to be? And then this system also managed to give us volatile acidity. Now, this takes a look at basically the acetic acid. So we all know that if we leave a wine open long enough, you'll basically get the ethanol converting into acetic acid, which smells like vinegar. In the vineyard, if we start having cluster breakdown, the grapes are actually opening up. We get the fermentation by the natural yeast of the sugars in the grapes, and then quickly turns to acetic acid. So one of the things we have to balance out as well in the vineyard is breakdown. And this is where a lot of sorting comes into. So some years we do a lot of sorting to remove stuff that is broken down. Other seasons it's not so bad. But if it's a volatile acidity on its own can be an indication of how bad the breakdown is in the vineyard. And it's something we do try to avoid. Okay, so we can go on to the next page here. So if we take a look at the cluster and petiole analysis, the first thing I'll say is looking at the bottom there, we have cluster weights. We found there was almost a 14% difference on cluster weights alone. So basically we're seeing that when we're taking a look at the treated versus the untreated, this thing is actually producing heavier clusters. The N, which is something, it's in here, but it's basically looking at the nitrogen, the amount of nitrogen within the must that the yeast will actually metabolize to help themselves break the sugar down into alcohol. So we don't see much difference there, which is fine. It'll be on an independent metabolic pathway. Now we take a look at the bricks. In this one, we had basically a 1% difference. It doesn't seem to be too much. But one of the things we'll relate back to is when we start taking a look at the micronutrients available. Well, one of the interesting things here is the total acidity has moved down is lower in the treated versus the untreated. Now, when we start taking a look at this, you're kind of like, okay, that's very, very interesting. Now, the pH was set at 2.8, and it was stable through both of them. And once again, that is a very complex relationship. So even though there's a difference in total acidity, it doesn't mean that the pH is overall affected. When we look at volatile acidity, there was once again a difference. The untreated had slightly higher volatile acidity, indicating a little bit more of a breakdown. And with this being GAM8, we know it's a tough grape to grow. And then finally, if you look at extracts, we are basically seeing that there's a slightly higher level of extracts on the treated versus the untreated. Now, if I had managed to get another set of samples in, I think we would have seen these numbers move more, and we would have had a much bigger difference across the board on a lot of these. So as I said, this particular year was a preliminary year to see what we can see. So if we go on to the next page here. So a couple of the important parameters we looked at in petiolar analysis. If we're looking at nitrogen, which is very important to growth, we'll see that the treated had lower nitrogen available at veraison versus the untreated, which if you take a look at the growth that we had earlier on, that we talked about, that's to be expected. I mean, we had heavier growth earlier on in the treated compared to the untreated. Now, the phosphorus allows for the movement of carbohydrates. We can see in the petiole analysis, there's double the amount of phosphorus. So what we're looking at there is that there should be better movement and better buildup of carbohydrates within these clusters. Now, potassium will affect berry size and osmotic pressure. If we take a look, there is, once again, a difference. In the treated vines, there's higher potassium than the untreated. And if we have a better balance in osmotic pressure, the vine is much, much happier in the vineyard. And where we get issues with osmotic pressure is when we go through these cycles of, we have, a nice couple of weeks of dry sun, and suddenly we get hammered with a bunch of rain. We all remember Harvest 2021, the effects that the rains overall were having on this. It would be interesting to see in a heavy rain season how, this treatment would actually affect this. And if we look at zinc, we can see that the zinc's almost on par, but mainly it's for berry growth and fruit set. So its major contribution is a little bit earlier in the season compared to the veraison. So if we go to the next slide here, what is the big picture on this? Well, when we take a look at the growth, we definitely had accelerated growth. The picture says it all. We had the treated stuff hitting the third wire 2 weeks ahead of the untreated vines, which is wonderful because now it basically means it's catching up a little bit with the season. The higher Brix levels, if we look at the fact that the phosphorus was higher in the treated versus the untreated, it basically means that if we had managed to get a second sample in, I would have expected that there would have been a bigger difference in the Brix levels. The phosphorus is going to aid in that. Also, on the growth side of things, we have heavier clusters on the treated. And once again, potassium aids in the carbohydrate movement and growth, and this will help lead to the heavier clusters. Now, if we start looking at better osmotic pressure regulation in the vine, you would expect lower volatile acidity throughout the vineyard. And this is basically what these results would indicate. So if we go on to the next slide here. So what does this all mean? Well, the accelerated growth shows the potential for vines in difficult areas to catch up to the rest of your vineyards in terms of growth. If we can push this stuff ahead a little bit faster on the growth, a little bit of catch up, it might make harvest a little bit easier, especially these tough spots. We know our issues are in cool years, we have to hang the fruit longer. And if this even gives that little bit of push for earlier, faster growth, then I call that a positive. Now, treated vines ahead in the ripening relative to the untreated vines, there is a potential for this. We saw the data in the first part of the seminar where we definitely saw differences in the Brix levels. Like I said, I would have expected Brix levels to be higher and the acidity levels to be lower in the treated vines. And there is that little bit of indication there, especially with the nutrients that were analyzed. This is a potential for moving the readiness of the crop earlier in cool years. So any little push forward in cool years means we can get the crops off of the vines sooner. Now, making nutrients more available to the vines during the season can lead to lower stress vines. They're not fighting as much. And once again, if the vines are putting more energy into the berries rather than fighting for nutrients because the season's not the greatest, it'll also have a positive effect on crop quality. Now, cool seasons lead to delayed harvest, which can affect cold hardiness in the following winter. If we could push this, even if this pushes things up a week, we can get this harvest off a little bit sooner and perhaps a little bit of better cold hardiness. I mean, this year we're looking pretty good at cold hardiness. Last year, where we had a slightly longer hang time on the fruit, the cold hardiness wasn't as good. And of course, we know that leads to issues in the wintertime coming up with possible losses in the vineyard. And of course, less breakdown of the fruit leads to better quality in the wine, but it also leads to less work on the sorting line. So if we can go on to the next slide here. So what's next for this? The first thing is go through, we're going to retreat this block this coming year. And I want to reproduce the data that's there and make sure we get a couple of different sets through the harvest so we can actually track this increase in the Brix levels, the lower of the acidity, and the extractables. We also have a block of 30-year-old plus vines, and we all know that older vines like this can start seeing a shift in lower metabolism, and a lot of these vines have. We want to see whether this can actually give them a little bit of kick and not harm them so much. We also have an opportunity in one of our blocks that we can actually apply this to diseased vines. Diseased vines, of course, are a major concern, not just in Niagara, but across the world. But if this can give a little bit of kick to the vines, it buys us a little bit of time on managing these vines. Yes, there is the risk of spreading disease, but the thing is that the disease is around no matter what. So if we can work with the vines and push them along a little bit further, and with the current wait times for some varieties, we can keep production up a little bit. Now, in the coming year, this will be year 2 for these old Gamay vines, and we're going to take a look at see if they're going to be healthier in the treated versus untreated vines. And then, of course, a little interesting thing that I picked up the other day at the Fruit and Vegetable Conference is there's a correlation between potassium and cold hardiness in plants. Given the fact that we're seeing higher potassium levels in the treated vines, is this enough to give us a little bit of better cold hardiness? So basically next year we'll be doing a little bit of a cold hardiness study on these vines while we're pruning, just to see how they're doing and just to see if there's any significant difference there. I think it's something that's very worthwhile looking into. So we have a lot of different things happening this year in the vineyard. In conclusion, I'd like to give my thanks to Tristan Bondet for basically allowing me to go through with these studies and, as we talk about these things. I'd also like to thank Shiraz Matir for also being supportive on this as the general manager of Malivoire. I'd like to thank everyone at Nurture Growth, especially Lee, for introducing this stuff to us and basically giving us something in the vineyard that's a tool that will hope that in a way leaves the environment better than what we found it in, which is, of course, a big part of the goal of sustainable farming. So thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing this valuable data. I'm very excited, for year two. Year one data looks good, but as we all know that, this is a part of a bigger study. We'll be very interested to see what the increase is going to be like in year two, and that's what we anticipated, based on informal data that we've been collecting, with our growers. We have a number of growers in the Niagara area as well as in the Prince Edward County area. So, it's very refreshing now to get this scientific data. We get a lot of very positive feedback, but now, we're putting the science, behind it. So thank you very much for, working with us on this trial data and giving us some of these results. And, thank you to Shiraz again. And, last few years, Shiraz and I had met, and finally this year he said, okay, talk to Steve. And thank you, Tristan, for working with us this year. So now I'd like to turn it over to Helena to has a few words, and then we will go into the question and answer period. So Helena, I'm going to turn this over to you.
I just want to say a huge thank you to Lee at Nurture Growth, as Steve as well at Malivoire. This information is invaluable and innovative and interesting, and I think it brings a lot of great education to grape growing in Ontario, which we're still always kind of figuring out our climate and climate change. I'm excited to share this with our membership as well, and look forward to seeing what next year's results are. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Helena. Okay, so now I'd like to turn it over to the question and answer period, and I see that there are some questions, so I'm going to go through it. So John, can I turn it over to you to ask the question?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the presentation. I know, Lee, we've spoken about this in the past, but just wondering again about the ability to mix Nurture Growth with other products, so we don't have to spray so many times in the vineyard. Does it reduce the effectiveness to mix it with, say, a basic fungicide, copper sulfur?
Yes. So last year, with the help of Malivoire, we were able to send some pesticides to A&L Lab, and we have concluded that many of the pesticides used in the vineyards are tank mixable, and sulfur. So in the past, we were not able to mix sulfur with our product. However, the studies have concluded that we are able to use Cumulus, with our product. So this way it makes it a lot easier for growers to have, one pass, as opposed to tank mixing a product and using a pesticide. And our product is also tank mixable with any fertilizer, any, micro and macronutrients. It's just a fungicide that we have to test. So if it's not on the list of tank mixable products, then if you can provide us with some samples, and then we can send it to A&L Lab. And I can also include that list when I send out the presentation at the very end.
Thank you. That would be great.
Thank you, John. Okay, Reed has a question. Can I turn this over to Reed to ask the question? Okay. His question was, any impact on reduced costs associated with chemical fertilizer versus Nurture Growth? Do you want to take a stab at that, Steve, or shall I answer?
I'll let you answer it. You have
Okay.
more data on that than I do.
Yeah, so we don't have any results as a reduction in cost, but what we have noticed with a number of our growers is that they're able to reduce not only their input costs, but also their pesticide costs as well. And in addition to that, reducing the amount of fertilizer, biofertilizer from our product. So just to give you an example, in one of our previous webinars, we had a grower who was saying that they had almost too much growth. So we recommend 4 liters per, so 1 gallon per application, at each application. However, they were noticing that there was almost too much growth. So we're going to recommend scaling back to maybe just 3 liters, as opposed to 4 liters per per acre. To give you another example of another grower, they have used our product for a number of years, and they've dialed it down now to just spraying, if I remember right, it's 3 liters per acre, or roughly around 4 liters per hectare, right? So over time, you will see that benefit of reducing your chemical fertilizer use, because our product has these extracellular enzymes that is able to improve the nutrient uptake. So you don't have to apply as much fertilizer in the past. And this is we will have to collect more data on it, but this is just anecdotal data that has been shared with our growers. I hope that answered your question, Reed. Okay. I have a question for Steve. So when we selected the site, we selected the site that needed the most help. Do you think that a product or any biological products, is it helpful to use it in a healthy area, or is there going to be any benefits? What do you think?
I think depending upon, part of it's going to depend upon the season. I mean, one of the things we take a look at is we have variable vintages in Niagara. I mean, where we get seasons where the vines are struggling, I do believe that applications of this would probably help the vines not struggle as much. And as such, if the vines aren't struggling as much, then there's a definite positive. Like a vine has so much energy per season to put into maintaining itself and growing the fruit. If it's putting more into maintaining itself, it's putting less into the fruit. And we see this across the board. I mean, I remember doing a flight of Pinot Noirs from 9, 10, 11, and 12. You could pick the cool years versus the warm years just by looking at the wines quite readily in the development of the crops. And if it's a tough season, any little bit helps these vines. It's better.
And Tristan says that's why we're using it only on blocks where it has weaker canopy growth, and not using it on blocks with stronger growth. Yes. So we do have some growers here in the audience that are using it as part of their fertility program. So regardless if it's young blocks, old blocks, they've seen the benefits, all around. But because this is your one trial, we want to prove to you, how well Nurture Growth works on vines. I think over time, the trial is going to be expanded to the point where you're going to be using it more as a way to help build the vine health and build that resiliency in the plant, because we have crazy weather here in Niagara and Prince Edward County, and very different challenges compared to our friends in Napa and even in the Finger Lakes, which is literally just across Lake Ontario. They have different growing challenges than we do, and the climate is a little bit different. I have a question about different soil types, and this is for Ankita. How does a biofertilizer work with different soil types, right? So because in the Niagara area, and Prince Edward County, even within from vineyard to vineyard, because of the way the glaciers move, there's different soil types. So how can a biofertilizer help in different soil types?
So since biofertilizers have multiple benefits, right? So it is helpful because of the presence of different microbes and their interaction. They help in the aggregation of soil and increase the porosity of soil. So make it improvement of soil texture. In addition to that, it has microbes. So these microbes, for example, phosphorus solubilizing and potash mobilizing microbes, they secrete certain enzymes which helpful in degrading breaking down those complex potassium or phosphorus which is unavailable for plant. And because of secreting these enzymes, it is helpful in reducing the pH of soil, because since these microbes secretes those acids which is helpful in the degradation of those unavailable phosphorus and potash and making it available for plants, so enriching the soil fertility as well as it is helpful in reducing the pH of soil because of the release of these acids. So it is helpful in like both ways, increasing the nutrient microbial content of the soil and making the porosity, soil enrichment. So it is helpful in changing the texture of soil, which we need for the growth and development of root and plant. Yeah.
One of the things that we're looking at and conducting trials this year is, we know that Nurture Growth helps to increase the yield and brick levels, but we're also interested, and we started doing this in Napa Valley, is doing a microbial count of the microbes that is in the soil. So we have some data in California, and we're looking for different test sites this year so that we can run these microbial tests. There's a probe that is available out of Quebec, where you would insert it, and it's supposed to measure not only your NPK but some other microbial count. So I think that they were tweaking their technology, and once that technology is available, hopefully by this year, we're going to be leasing that and going around to the different test sites so that we can gather some more information just beyond the brick levels and the yield levels. We really want to see how it interacts in the soil. I see Steve Mitchell says, could these microbes have any interaction, positive or negative, with the roots inoculated with mycorrhizae?
So microbes, whatever microbes in this product have, or natural biologicals, if we are talking about, so soil already have some different type of microbes. They can be beneficial, they can be pathogenic, and some microbes are neutral, which just live in the soil and they don't do anything, like no positive or negative impact. So these microbes which we are releasing in the soil or which are beneficial for the plant, they have the synergistic or positive effect with the beneficial microbes. And mycorrhiza, like Nurture Growth also have the mycorrhiza in because it has around more than 20 microbes, and mycorrhiza is also a part, and it is helpful in like phosphorus availability, helpful in the phosphorus, making phosphorus available for plant. So it has positive impact, not negative impact for mycorrhiza.
Yeah. Our product also has arbuscular mycorrhizae, as one of the microbes in our formulation. There's another question from John, and maybe I can get Steve to get your experience, and then over to Ankita. Is a soil soak effective if cover crops are in place, or does it simply enhance the cover crop weed growth? What was your experience with that, Steve, in the vineyard?
Well, we had pretty good cover crop growth through the season. So I mean, and through all our vineyards. So I mean, the drench goes on before the weeds really start growing. So I would say early on that there's probably no effect on that. Basically the effect of the microbes all goes into the vines, and I'm sure there is some competition with the weeds. Unfortunately, I did not track or compare the weed growth, and that just gave me an idea that this year we can take a look at that. So see if there's any differences in the weeds and the treated versus the untreated rows, for instance.
Yeah, we haven't collected any data on that. So Ankita, do you want to add anything to that?
So for like cover crop is the good alternative to control these weed growth. So I think some research is already going on in some institutes. So to find out whether like there is any positive impact of using cover crops to control these weeds. So still we don't have exact figures for that our product like biofertilizers is helpful, like how it impact on weed, because if we are including beneficial microbes, definitely with the growth of plant, weeds are also getting the nutrients, right? So but to control this weed problem, the cover crops like alternative like alfalfa and clovers, these could be an alternative. We can use it as a cover crop to control the growth of weeds. Yeah.
I mean, basically, I mean, there are studies going on, in a neighboring vineyard where they're looking at undervine cover crop growth. So there might be a positive with respect to that, helping establish the cover crops and get them to grow thick enough to do the weeds. But quite essentially, we don't have any cover crops under the vines. And when we drench it, we direct it towards the vines and away from the cover crops in the rows themselves. So it does hit the dirt. And yes, you know, we, like everyone else, we get weeds. But you know, there's enough mechanical removal of the weeds that they don't get too bad. But yeah, it'll be something I'll just try and take a look at regularly to see if there's a difference in the weed growth as we go forward. Maybe they come up early, maybe not. I don't know.
Good question. Thank you. So we are nearing the the bottom of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I wanted to thank Steve and Malivoire, Tristan and Shiraz for working with us on this trial. I'd like to thank Helena at the Ontario Craft Wineries in partnering with us on this education series. We do as part of our new program is that we're trying to host a lot more educational webinars, and as well as writing blogs specifically to help growers understand, you know, biologicals. In the past 10 years, and you know, next week actually, Nurture Growth is turning 10 years old. You know, I've learned a lot, you know, as well. And as you know, we grow as a company, we want to provide more knowledge, you know, to our growers. And I thank you so much for continuing to support us. And our next webinar is on I think we're bringing back the webinar about Biologicals 101, just because there were a lot of people who missed it in January. So we're bringing that back for the month of March, and you know, please, you know, register for that one. So this concludes our presentation, and if anyone wants to stick around for a few minutes to ask any, you know, questions, please feel free to stick around. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay warm.
And I would encourage everyone to sign up for the Nurture Growth newsletter, because it's phenomenal. It comes into our inbox every month. And Lee, you put a lot of information in there that's super valuable.
Thank you. And it's actually really a team. I have Frida on the line as well. One of the sections that you will also be seeing is that we're going to be including more information about industry news. So just, you know, everything from wineries to you know, sweet potatoes to tobacco. But there's another section that is about grants. So, you know, look out for that section on grants. So yeah. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'll stick around for those who want to ask any additional questions. I have a question for Steve Mitchell. Would you be applying this as a drip irrigation? So in California, they are applying strictly as a drip irrigation, at least in the northern part of California, in the Napa Valley, and in the Salinas area, which is a little bit, it's around 3 hours south. They're doing a mix between drip irrigation as well as a foliar spray. So I would say that almost all of the vineyards in Ontario are doing it as a foliar spray, and just in areas where they have a water shortage, that they do a drip irrigation. However, with the drip irrigation, what we have noticed is that they don't necessarily get the same benefits as a foliar spray. So as an anecdotal data from our growers is that using it as a foliar spray, one, it has helped to suppress insects, so the Japanese beetles, the leaf hoppers. And the reason why we suspect that is, number one, we have a number of microbes in there that are used in biocontrol products. So we have trichoderma, we've got subtilis, we've got Pomilus, which are used as in biocontrol products. So that's number one. Number two, we suspect that the bugs don't like the fermentation. So there's some sort of acidity and smell that they don't like. But first and foremost, we are a biofertilizer product, and anything else with bugs and disease is like a bonus. So I hope that answers your question. So if you apply it as a drip irrigation, you might not see those same results, you know, with the pests. Okay. I think that's it. Tim, you have any questions? Nope. Augustino? Nope. Okay. Oh, hi, okay, Tim. Yes. So Tim, yes, if the product is stored over the winter, it is still effective. So we've run this through A&L Labs, and we ran a test that it was frozen for 3 years because we wanted to mimic what conditions are like in a storage shed. So if you have, let's say, a quarter left over at the end of the season, you're not going to apply it. You want to store it. So as long as it's away from sunlight and you store and tighten the lid, keep it in a cool, dark place, even if it's frozen, not a problem. And we do have lab reports to prove that. You'll see a 15% degradation in terms of the microbial population, after the first year. However, we normally like to provide only the amount that you need. So we always determine, what size area that you have, and then we calculate, okay, this is, how much, product you need. And because we're in Ontario, it's, we're so close that we can ship and we can provide it to you, very, very quickly.